The crack of a rifle shot echoed across the valley, silencing the whispers that Penelope Zimmerman couldn't shoot straight. The tin can that had been perched on the fence post 50 yards away spun through the air, a clean hole punched through its center. Penelope lowered the Winchester, a satisfied smile playing at her lips as she blew away the wisp of smoke curling from the barrel. It was 1878 in Silvercrest, Colorado, a town where a woman handling firearms was considered as peculiar as a rattlesnake in a henhouse. "Lucky shot," muttered Thomas Wilson, crossing his arms over his broad chest. The other ranch hands snickered, their disbelief evident in their scornful eyes. Penelope's jaw tightened. "Lucky, I'll give you lucky." Without hesitation, she reloaded and fired 3 more shots in rapid succession, each bullet finding its mark with deadly accuracy. 3 more cans danced in the air before clattering to the dusty ground. The men fell silent, though their expressions remained skeptical. Penelope had arrived in Silvercrest just 2 weeks prior, answering an advertisement for work at the Broken Spur Ranch. Her father had taught her everything about ranching before his passing last winter, but no one here seemed willing to acknowledge her capabilities. They'd relegated her to cooking and mending tasks she could do well enough but found no passion in. "Miss Zimmerman," the authoritative voice of Harold Jenkins, the ranch foreman, cut through the air. "What do you think you're doing with that rifle? Put it down and get back to the kitchen." "Dinner won't cook itself." Penelope turned, her green eyes flashing with defiance. "I was demonstrating my shooting skills, Mr. Jenkins. I believe I answered an advertisement for ranch work, not kitchen work." "Ranch work is men's work," Jenkins replied dismissively. "Besides, the boss will be back tomorrow. He'd have my hide if he found you doing anything but what women are meant to do." Penelope bit back a retort. She needed this job. Her father's medical bills had left her nearly destitute, and the small inheritance wouldn't last long. With a stiff nod, she handed the rifle to Wilson, who smirked triumphantly. "That's right. Know your place," he said, just loud enough for her to hear. The next morning brought clear skies and the return of Clayton Keating, owner of the Broken Spur. Penelope had yet to meet him, having been hired by Jenkins during Keating's absence. She was kneading dough for biscuits when the kitchen door swung open, revealing a tall, broad-shouldered figure. Clayton Keating was not what Penelope had expected. In her mind, she'd pictured a grizzled old cattleman, not this man who couldn't be more than 35. His face was tanned and weathered from the sun, but his eyes were a startling blue that seemed to take in everything at once. Dark hair curled beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a strong jawline. "You must be the new hire," he said, his voice a deep rumble that matched his imposing presence. Jenkins mentioned he'd found someone to help in the house. Penelope straightened, wiping flour from her hands. "I'm Penelope Zimmerman, Mr. Keating, but I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I answered your advertisement for ranch work, not housework." Clayton's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ranch work." "Madam, with all due respect, that's not suitable for a woman," Penelope interrupted, then immediately regretted her boldness. "I apologize for the interruption, but I grew up on a cattle ranch in Wyoming. My father taught me everything he knew before he passed. I can rope, ride, and shoot as well as any man you've hired." Clayton studied her for a long moment. She was a striking woman with fiery red hair pulled back in a practical bun and freckles scattered across her nose. But it was the determination in her eyes that caught his attention and the calluses he could see on her hands as she nervously wiped them on her apron. "Miss Zimmerman," their conversation was interrupted by the sound of commotion outside. Clayton frowned, moving to the window. "What the devil?" Penelope joined him, peering out to see several ranch hands trying to control a magnificent black stallion that was rearing and bucking in the corral. The horse had broken free of its lead rope and was terrorizing the men attempting to recapture it. "That's Midnight," Clayton explained. "Wildest Mustang we've ever tried to break. I bought him from a trader last month, but none of my men can stay on his back for more than a few seconds." Without thinking, Penelope rushed outside, ignoring Clayton's surprised call. The stallion was causing chaos, sending men scrambling over the fence to escape his flashing hooves. Something in her recognized the fear in the animal's eyes, not wildness, but terror. "Stand back," she called to the men. "You're only frightening him more," Jenkins scoffed. "Get back inside, woman. This is no place for you." But Penelope had already entered the corral, moving slowly and deliberately. The stallion's ears pricked forward, his nostrils flaring as he assessed this new human. She began to speak in a low, soothing voice, not approaching directly but moving in a wide circle. "Easy, boy. No one's going to hurt you," she murmured, gradually decreasing the distance between them. Clayton watched in astonishment as the stallion's frantic movements began to calm. The horse was still wary, but Penelope continued her quiet approach, eventually extending her hand palm up. Minutes passed in tense silence before Midnight finally stretched his neck forward, nostrils fluttering as he caught her scent. "That's it," she whispered. "We understand each other, don't we? Both of us trying to prove our worth in a world that's already decided what we can and cannot do." To everyone's amazement, the stallion allowed her to touch his muzzle. Penelope smiled, slowly stroking his neck. Then, with a grace that spoke of years of experience, she grasped his mane and in one fluid movement swung herself onto his bare back. The stallion stiffened but didn't buck. Penelope sat perfectly balanced, her body moving in harmony with the horse's nervous shifting. After a few tense moments, Midnight seemed to accept her presence, and she guided him around the corral using only the pressure of her knees and soft words. When she finally slid off, the stallion remained beside her, as docile as a lamb. The ranch hand stood slack-jawed, while Jenkins looked as though he'd swallowed something sour. Clayton Keating's expression, however, was unreadable as he approached the fence. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, his voice measured, "it seems I need to reassess your position on this ranch." The following morning, Penelope found herself not in the kitchen but in the stables, where Clayton was waiting with a saddle and bridle. "I want you to show me what else you can do," he said without preamble. "Jenkins thinks I'm making a mistake, but I believe in judging folks by their abilities, not their gender." Relief flooded through Penelope. "Thank you, Mr. Keating, I won't disappoint you." "Call me Clayton," he replied, a small smile softening his features. "And I don't think you will." Over the next several hours, Penelope demonstrated her prowess with horses, her skill with a lasso, and her knowledge of cattle. She spoke intelligently about breeding, grazing rotation, and the signs of various bovine diseases. By midday, Clayton was not just impressed, he was astounded. "Where did you learn all this?" he asked as they watered their horses at a creek that ran through the property. Penelope's expression grew wistful. "My father, James Zimmerman, ran a successful operation in Wyoming. My mother died when I was young, so he raised me on his own. He didn't have a son, so he taught me everything instead." She sighed. "When he died, the bank foreclosed. They wouldn't consider letting a woman take over the loans." Clayton's brow furrowed. "That's a shame. From what I've seen today, you would have made it work." "That's kind of you to say," she replied, surprised by his understanding. As they rode back to the ranch house, Clayton made a decision. "Penelope, I'd like to offer you a position as my assistant ranch manager." Penelope nearly fell off her horse in shock. What? You have knowledge and skills this operation could benefit from. Jenkins knows cattle, but he's set in his ways. I've been looking to modernize, expand our breeding program. I think you could help." "The men won't accept it," Penelope said, though hope blossomed in her chest. Clayton's jaw set determinedly. "They'll accept it because I say they will. But you'll have to prove yourself every day, twice as hard as any man would." "I'm used to that," she replied with a determined smile. True to Penelope's prediction, the announcement of her new position was met with resistance. Jenkins was livid, threatening to quit until Clayton reminded him of the generous salary he received. The ranch hands were less vocal but equally dubious, exchanging glances and muttering among themselves. Only Rafael Ortiz, an experienced vaquero who had worked the ranch for decades, showed any support. "I judge by what these eyes see, not what others tell me I should see," he told Penelope one evening. "And these old eyes see a true ranchera." Those words sustained Penelope through the difficult days that followed. Every morning, she rose before dawn, determined to work harder and longer than anyone else. She endured the accidental soakings when fences needed mending near irrigation ditches, the sabotaged equipment, and the constant testing of her knowledge and authority. Clayton observed it all, intervening only when absolutely necessary. "You need to win their respect on your own terms," he explained when she questioned his apparent indifference. "If I fight your battles, they'll never truly accept you." Penelope understood, but it didn't make the challenges any easier. The turning point came 3 weeks into her new role when a severe thunderstorm spooked the cattle. A section of the herd broke away, heading toward a dangerous ravine. Without hesitation, Penelope mounted Midnight, who had become her devoted companion, and galloped after them. The rain lashed at her face, and lightning illuminated the chaotic scene in stark flashes. She rode like a woman possessed, getting ahead of the lead steer and turning it away from danger just in time. By the time Clayton and the other men caught up, Penelope had the situation under control. She sat astride Midnight, drenched and muddy but triumphant, as the cattle milled about in a manageable group. "Impressive work, Miss Zimmerman," said Wilson, the first to acknowledge her skill without prompting. Slowly, grudgingly, the men began to accept Penelope's authority. Jenkins remained resistant, but even he couldn't deny her contributions when their first calf crop under her breeding recommendations yielded healthier, stronger animals. Throughout it all, Clayton was a steadfast ally. Their working relationship evolved into a partnership of equals, with each recognizing and respecting the other's strengths. They spent long hours discussing ranch operations, often losing track of time as evening stretched into night. Penelope found herself drawn to Clayton in ways that went beyond professional admiration. His quiet strength, his willingness to challenge convention, and the respect with which he treated her were qualities she had never encountered in a man before. And sometimes, when their hands accidentally touched or their eyes met for a moment too long, she wondered if he might feel something similar. 6 months after Penelope's arrival at Broken Spur, Clayton announced plans to attend the Denver Livestock Exhibition. "I want you to come with me," he told Penelope. "We'll show some of our best stock, make connections with potential buyers." The prospect of representing the ranch in such a public forum was both exciting and terrifying. "Are you sure?" Penelope asked. "Many of those cattlemen are even more traditional than Jenkins." Clayton smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his serious face. "All the more reason to shake things up. Besides, it's time the ranching community recognized that talent doesn't reside exclusively in male bodies." The exhibition was held in a large fairground on the outskirts of Denver. Visitors and participants from all over the West had gathered, creating a bustling atmosphere of commerce and competition. Penelope and Clayton had brought several of their finest animals, including a young bull from their new breeding program that they were particularly proud of. As expected, Penelope's presence as Clayton's business partner rather than his wife or sister raised eyebrows. She endured curious stares and not-so-subtle whispers as they made their rounds, inspecting other ranchers' stock and engaging in business discussions. "Keating," boomed a corpulent man with an enormous mustache, approaching their exhibit area. "Didn't expect to see you here. Thought you were too busy playing nursemaid to that ranch your daddy left you." Clayton's expression remained neutral. "Bernard Whitcomb. Still buying up every piece of land you can get your hands on, I see." Whitcomb's small eyes shifted to Penelope. "And who might this lovely lady be?" "Surely not Mrs. Keating. Last I heard, you were too married to that spread of yours to take a wife." "This is Miss Penelope Zimmerman, my partner in running Broken Spur," Clayton replied evenly. Whitcomb's eyebrows shot up. "Partner? That's what they're calling it these days. He chuckled, the implication clear in his tone. Penelope stepped forward before Clayton could respond. Business partner, Mr. Whitcomb. I oversee our breeding program and cattle operations alongside Mr. Keating. Whitcomb's laugh turned derisive. Well, I'll be. Keating, I never took you for a man who'd let a woman tell him how to run his affairs. I don't let Miss Zimmerman do anything, Clayton replied coolly. I recognize expertise when I see it, regardless of whether it comes in trousers or skirts. Other ranchers had gathered around, drawn by the confrontation. Whitcomb, aware of his audience, pressed on. Expertise in what? Darning socks, making a fine apple pie. In producing the healthiest calf crop Broken Spur has seen in a decade, Penelope answered, maintaining her composure. Our mortality rate is down 15% and our average weight at market is up 20 pounds per head. Numbers don't lie, Mr. Whitcomb, even when people do. A murmur ran through the onlookers. Whitcomb's face reddened. Well, that's a charming story. But I'd wager that bull of yours couldn't hold a candle to my prize Hereford in the judging ring. Care to make that an official wager? Clayton asked, a glint in his eye. Whitcomb smirked. What did you have in mind? If our bull takes the blue ribbon in its class, you publicly acknowledge Miss Zimmerman's expertise and invite her to consult on your breeding program for a day paid at the same rate you'd pay any male expert. The gathered crowd murmured with interest. Whitcomb's eyes narrowed. And if my bull wins? Clayton glanced at Penelope, who gave a slight nod. Then I'll sell you that 100-acre parcel along the river you've been after at last year's price. Gasps and low whistles circulated. The land in question was prime grazing territory that Whitcomb had been trying to acquire for years. Done, Whitcomb said, extending his hand. Hope you weren't too attached to that riverside property, Keating. As the crowd dispersed, Penelope turned to Clayton. That was a considerable risk you just took. Clayton's eyes held her steadily. I believe in our bull, and I believe in you, Penelope. The warmth that spread through her at his words had nothing to do with the summer heat. The judging took place the following day, with much of the exhibition's attendees gathered to watch. Whitcomb's Hereford was impressive, a massive animal with excellent conformation. But when Penelope led their young bull into the ring, handling the powerful creature with confident ease that surprised many onlookers, even Whitcomb looked concerned. The judge, a venerable cattleman from Kansas, took his time examining each animal. He checked teeth, ran his hands along flanks, and observed movement with a critical eye. When he finally stepped back to announce his decision, the crowd fell silent. First place goes to Broken Spur Ranch, he declared, handing Penelope the blue ribbon. Finest example of selective breeding I've seen in years. The applause was genuine, though Whitcomb's face suggested he'd bitten into something sour. True to his word, however, he approached Penelope and Clayton after the ceremony. Seems I'll be requiring your services, Miss Zimmerman, he said stiffly. Though I still can't fathom how a woman came by such knowledge. The same way any man does, Mr. Whitcomb, she replied with a sweet smile, through study, observation, and hard work. That evening, Clayton surprised Penelope by inviting her to dinner at one of Denver's finest restaurants. To celebrate our victory, he explained, looking uncharacteristically nervous. The restaurant was elegant, with white tablecloths and crystal glasses that sparkled in the lamplight. Penelope felt conspicuous in her practical traveling dress, but Clayton assured her she looked beautiful. I've never seen you in anything but work clothes, he remarked as they were seated. You're quite striking, Penelope, she blushed, unused to such personal comments from him. Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself. They talked easily throughout dinner, the conversation flowing from ranch matters to more personal topics. Clayton spoke of his childhood on Broken Spur, of the father who had taught him the value of hard work and fair dealing. He would have liked you, Clayton said, his eyes warm. He always said that stubborn people make the best ranchers, and you're certainly stubborn, Penelope laughed. I prefer determined. Determined then, he conceded with a smile. It's one of the things I admire most about you. As the evening progressed, Penelope sensed a change in Clayton's demeanor. He seemed to be working himself up to something, his fingers tapping restlessly on the tablecloth. Finally, as they finished their dessert, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Penelope's heart lurched. "Clayton, I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he confessed, placing the box on the table between them. "Penelope, these past months working alongside you have been the most fulfilling of my life. You've challenged me, inspired me, and if I'm being honest, completely captivated me." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small diamond. "I'm not offering to make you my wife in the traditional sense. I don't want you confined to hearth and home. I'm asking if you'll be my partner in everything the ranch life, whatever the future brings. Equal in all things." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. "Clayton, if you need time to consider—" "No," she interrupted, reaching for his hand. "I don't need time. My answer is yes. Yes to being your partner in everything." The relief and joy that flooded Clayton's face was answer enough to a question Penelope had long harbored, whether his feelings for her matched the depth of hers for him. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at Broken Spur. Raphael stood as witness, and even Jenkins managed a grudging congratulations. The ranch hands presented them with a hand-carved sign for the ranch house that read Keating and Zimmerman in bold letters. "We figured you'd want to keep your name for business," Wilson explained, surprising Penelope yet again with how far the men had come in accepting her. Life as Mrs. Clayton Keating was not dramatically different from Penelope's previous role at Broken Spur, which was exactly as she wanted it. They worked side by side, making decisions together and dividing responsibilities according to their strengths rather than prescribed gender roles. Of course, there were adjustments. Sharing living quarters with Clayton was a new experience, one filled with sweet discoveries and occasional awkward moments as they learned each other's habits and preferences. But the mutual respect that had formed the foundation of their professional relationship translated beautifully into their marriage. Their first major test came when Whitcomb, still smarting from his public defeat, began spreading rumors that Clayton had married Penelope to save a failing ranch, suggesting that Broken Spur was on the verge of financial ruin. "He's trying to undermine our credit at the bank," Clayton fumed when they heard the gossip. "If lenders believe we're struggling, they might call in our loans prematurely." Penelope considered the problem. "Then we need to demonstrate our success in a way that can't be denied. The cattle drive to Kansas City is coming up. What if we brought in the highest price per head of any ranch in the territory?" Clayton's brow furrowed. "That's ambitious. The market's been unpredictable this year." "True, but our stock is exceptional. And if I work with the drovers on conditioning the cattle before the drive, we can ensure they arrive in prime condition, not trail thin like most herds." It was a bold plan, requiring extensive preparation and a significant deviation from traditional practices. Some of the drovers resisted Penelope's feeding regimen and slower pace, arguing that it would add unnecessary days to the journey. "Time on the trail costs money," trail boss Sam Dockery pointed out during a planning meeting. "So does selling underweight cattle," Penelope countered. "Trust me on this, Sam. The additional profit will more than offset the extra days." In the end, Clayton backed Penelope's strategy, and the drovers reluctantly complied. Penelope herself accompanied the drive, another unconventional decision that raised eyebrows but which Clayton supported without reservation. "We're partners," he reminded her as they prepared for her departure. "That means sharing the risks as well as the rewards." The cattle drive was grueling, with scorching days and chilly nights. Penelope took her turn at watch, rode drag through choking dust, and endured every hardship alongside the men. By the time they reached Kansas City, she had earned the genuine respect of every drover, including the initially skeptical Sam. and her strategy paid off spectacularly. Broken Spur's cattle commanded prices 30% higher than any other herd, their prime condition immediately apparent to buyers. The success was so notable that a reporter from the Kansas City Star interviewed Penelope about their methods. When the article appeared under the headline "Rancher's Wife Revolutionizes Cattle Drive," Penelope was initially disappointed by the diminutive description. But Clayton pointed out the significance of the coverage itself. "They may call you a rancher's wife now," he said, "but they're publishing your ideas, Penelope. That's a start. Change doesn't happen overnight." Upon their return to Silvercrest, they discovered that Whitcomb's rumors had withered in the face of their demonstrable success. The bank manager himself rode out to Broken Spur to discuss expanding their line of credit for further improvements, a complete reversal from his previous wariness. As their first anniversary approached, Penelope and Clayton had established a reputation that extended well beyond Colorado. Ranchers from as far away as Montana wrote seeking advice on breeding and cattle management, and several had even sent their daughters to Broken Spur to learn from Penelope. "You've started something important," Clayton told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Something that will outlast both of us." Penelope leaned against his shoulder. "We started it together. That's what makes it work." Their contentment was complete when Penelope discovered she was expecting a child. The pregnancy didn't slow her down much, though Clayton insisted on taking over some of her more strenuous duties as her condition advanced. "I'm pregnant, not incapacitated," she protested when he relieved her of breaking the new horses. "Humor me," he replied, kissing her forehead. "There are some risks not worth taking, even for the most capable woman in Colorado territory." Penelope relented, finding plenty of other ways to contribute to the ranch's operations. She used the time to compile a comprehensive manual of their breeding and management practices, complete with detailed records and observations. "For our child," she explained when Clayton questioned the extensive project, "and for others who want to follow our methods. Knowledge should be shared, not hoarded." Their son, James Clayton Keating, was born on a clear spring morning in 1880 with Raphael's wife, Elena, serving as midwife. The boy had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined expression, even as an infant. "He'll be a handful," Raphael predicted with a smile. The child of two such strong minds could be nothing else. Motherhood brought new challenges and joys, but true to their partnership, Penelope and Clayton adapted together. Clayton was as comfortable cradling his son while reviewing cattle ledgers as Penelope was discussing expansion plans with little James secured in a sling across her chest. As the years passed, Broken Spur flourished. They added sheep to their operations, experimented successfully with new grazing techniques, and even ventured into horse breeding, with Midnight's offspring becoming renowned throughout the West for their strength and intelligence. Their family grew as well. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined them in 1882, followed by another son, Thomas, in 1884. The children grew up understanding that work was shared according to ability, not gender, watching their parents' equal partnership with the clear-eyed acceptance of those who have never known any other way. The most significant validation of their approach came in 1885. When the newly formed Colorado Cattlemen's Association invited both Clayton and Penelope to serve on its founding board, the first woman ever accorded such recognition. "Times are changing," observed the association's president at their first meeting. "Slowly, perhaps, but changing nonetheless." Indeed, by the time their oldest son was ready to take on more responsibility at the ranch, the sight of women in the cattle business was no longer as shocking as it had once been. Several of the girls Penelope had mentored over the years had returned to their family ranches with new ideas and expectations. "You've left your mark on more than just Broken Spur," Clayton told her on their 15th anniversary, as they watched a new generation of hands, including several women moving a herd to summer pasture. Penelope smiled. lines of experience now framing her still vibrant eyes. "We did, Clayton." "Together? Any regrets?" he asked, his arm secure around her waist. She considered the question seriously. "Only that my father didn't live to see this. He always believed I could do anything a man could do, but even he never imagined a partnership like ours." Clayton nodded thoughtfully. "My father was the same. Progressive for his time, but still bound by certain expectations. I wonder what our grandchildren will consider possible." The question was answered sooner than they might have expected. Their daughter Elizabeth, at 16, already showed signs of a scientific mind, conducting methodical experiments with plant varieties to determine which might thrive in Colorado's challenging climate. "I want to study at the university," she announced one evening at dinner. "Professor Hamilton at the college in Denver says they might accept female students in the agriculture program next year." Clayton and Penelope exchanged glances, a lifetime of communication passing between them in an instant. "If that's what you want, we'll support you completely," Clayton said. "Though you might have to fight a few battles along the way," Penelope added with a knowing smile. Elizabeth's chin lifted in a gesture so reminiscent of her mother that Clayton had to suppress a chuckle. "I'm not afraid of a fight. You two taught me that." James, now 18, nodded in agreement. "Lizzie's smarter than half the boys at school anyway. They'd be fools not to accept her." As their children grew and pursued their own paths, James eventually taking over much of the ranch management, Elizabeth becoming one of Colorado's first female agricultural scientists, and Thomas finding his calling as a veterinarian. Penelope and Clayton remained at the heart of Broken Spur, adapting to the changing times while maintaining the principles that had guided them from the beginning. By 1903, at the dawn of a new century, Broken Spur had become one of the most progressive and successful ranching operations in the West. Penelope, now in her 50s but still vibrant, had published a book on cattle management that was considered authoritative in ranching circles. Clayton, his dark hair now streaked with silver, had served 2 terms in the state legislature, advocating for land conservation practices decades ahead of his time. Together, they had built something remarkable, not just a profitable business, but a legacy of equality and mutual respect that influenced far beyond their property lines. On a golden autumn evening, as they sat on the same porch where they had watched so many sunsets together, Penelope reflected on the journey. "You remember the day we met?" she asked, her hand comfortably entwined with Clayton's. "When I was kneading dough and trying not to lose my temper at being relegated to the kitchen," Clayton laughed, the sound as warm and genuine as it had been in his youth. "I remember being completely taken aback by the fiery-haired woman who informed me I'd misunderstood my own job advertisement. And then midnight decided to cause a ruckus, giving me the perfect opportunity to show off," she added with a smile. "That horse knew what he was doing," Clayton said. "Smartest animal we ever had on this ranch." Penelope's expression grew more serious. "What made you take that chance on me, Clayton? So many men wouldn't have." He considered the question for a moment. "I'd like to claim some noble, forward-thinking principle, but the truth is simpler. I saw someone who could do the job better than anyone else available. It would have been poor business to waste your talents. Just good business sense," she teased. "At first," he admitted. "But then I discovered that working alongside someone who challenges your thinking, who brings different perspectives and skills to the table, that's not just good business. It's the best way to live." He squeezed her hand. "Finding you was the luckiest day of my life, Penelope Zimmerman Keating, and the smartest decision you ever made," she added with a laugh. "That too," he agreed, leaning over to kiss her softly. "Absolutely that too." As the sun sank below the distant mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, they sat in companionable silence. 2 pioneers who had blazed a trail not just across the western landscape, but through the rigid social expectations of their time. The legacy they created, a true partnership of equals, would endure long after they were gone. passed down through their children, and the countless lives they had influenced along the way. For in a time when a woman's skills were dismissed because of her gender, Clayton Keating had made Penelope his equal partner in everything. And together, they had changed their small corner of the world forever.